And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of RAGIN with our special guest this evening is Chris Fisk. He has got a campaign on Indiegogo right now. We're going to be talking about that, the creative journey. This is I'm not having a stroke, people. Really. This is episode 53 of RAGIN with. While you're tuning in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, share this out with your friends, and let's have a little fun. We've got an intro, and we'll be right back after this.
RAGIN.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to RAGIN with Chris Fisk this evening. Episode 53. Let me drop the card so we can say hello. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing really, really well. So now, where do you hail from? Are you in the States or are you across the pond?
I'm in New Hampshire, New England.
Okay. All right. I heard a little bit of an accent, and I was like,
Yeah, it's. Have you ever seen Highlander?
Yes.
Do you remember? Hey, you've got a funny accent. Where are you from? And he says, lots of different places. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it has to do with being moving around. It's left its impact on my accent.
Oh,
because I mean, if you heard me when I was like, I don't know, super young, dude, I probably sounded like your typical Bostonian. But
oh
no.
my God, you got to pack the cast somewhere.
Yeah, dude, it's wicked hard. So yeah, it's I don't know. I don't.
Oh my gosh, imagine all of that and then move south. Throw on a southern accent.
Why is everyone calling me Hoss?
Well, welcome everybody. If you're tuning in live, great. We have all of the links in our show notes that get to his social media, so make sure you follow him everywhere. Just don't peek in his windows because that's weird. We've also got the link to his campaign, which is going on right now on Indiegogo. We're going to be talking about that later. But Chris, we love the creative journey. And so how long have you kind of been in this field? I know that you've been, that you used to kind of design video games, role-playing games and things like that. Comic books, I'm in year 2 in developing my own. Not the easiest thing. Glad I wasn't a youngin' when I started that process. But what kind of got you on this path with this type of creativity?
I think it was probably somewhere around 1991 that got me into the whole literacy thing. Being a horrible dyslexic, I was a dumb kid. I'll say that much. I had pretty delayed literacy levels, and it was really sad. I had a friend who was about 3 years younger than me, and he was a nerd. He was a really smart kid. And one day we were making games with GI Joes and dice and stuff, and he's like, there's a club over at the Pelham Public Library. They're doing this fantasy club thing, and I was like, oh God, I'm gonna get my ass kicked, aren't I?
Right, nerds.
Yeah.
Nerds.
But he convinced me, and I went there, and I am so grateful to him for that, because it introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons. And a librarian who is extremely encouraging and supportive. She she's like, oh, you can draw. Well, we have newsletters, and I can put you to work. And then she was also a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and she played the game along with the kids. And I was one of the younger kids, which was weird. Obviously my friend being younger than me, we were, kind of the younger ones in that lot. And as the years passed, we became the older kids. But it was interesting though to see, going from somebody that had almost no interest in reading and was just a bunch of words on, the Beavis and Butthead words. it became, I had to get the books. I had to, and maybe this is just the superficial part of me, but I was a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons art, like Keith Parkinson, Larry Elmore, Jeff Easley, all of those guys. It was just like my walls were flecked with them. I had to have all the posters, and I judged the books by their covers, and I really enjoyed the books. And unfortunately, what I found is that the books became more and more expensive. Oh, you got 2.5. Well, 3.0 just came out. They're all useless, so I had to buy all new, and I didn't have the money for it. So I was like, well, maybe I can just make my own. And I started making my own game system. But the first thing that I learned early on, some 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid going, I can do this. And I learned that as a dungeon master, when you're creating these worlds, the world is only as big as the knowledge of the dungeon master. So when you have players that are smarter than you, and I was usually the dumbest guy in the room, it was incredibly limiting to players, where they're like, what do you mean you don't know what deciduous means? Or what do you mean that you don't know what a habersion is? Or, and it's, oh God. So I started, and again, this is before the internet. So I plumbed the depths of the Pelham Public Library and probably read almost every single book in it, just for reference. Encyclopedia Britannica, books on herbalism, books on alchemy, like you name it, all sorts of weird things. And I loved the folklore books, especially the obscure ones, like the Finland's Kalevala. It's kind of like their origin myth of the ancient Finns, and it's pretty impressive. And yet I'm surprised it's not as mainstream as like the Vikings or the Norse mythology, or what is it, like Snorri Sturluson's Eddas there with the Icelandic saga, the Wolsungs. Like, I don't know. I read through it all, and I loved nerding out on it, and that was what I brought into the game that I was creating. And it over the years, it went from he's the dumbest guy in the room to, hey, let's have him on our Trivial Pursuit team.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the things that I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there about comic books, especially in a mainstream like consumer atmosphere. They're like, oh, it's just pictures and words. It's for babies and stuff like that. But they don't realize that a good storyteller will use the big words. I mean, not enough to confuse you, but enough to maybe expand your vocabulary. And it's the same thing with games. I've been really surprised with some of the games that I've seen when it comes to things like alchemy, weapons, just territory maps and things like that. There's like a lot of stuff that goes into it, and people are like, oh, it's just an artist rendition. I'm like, no, there's a lot more that goes into that, And so how do we as creators, especially in gaming and in comics, how do we kind of break through and say, no, we aren't dummies. This isn't just pictures and words. This is actually like research.
Work.
This is development.
This is work.
Yeah, I mean, how do we break through that?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I kind of appreciated in some of the writing that I've like researched was, like, in a screenplay, I think it's called like is it the gun, or I can't remember exactly what the archetype is, but it's this idea that if you show something like a gun in scene one, it needs to be used before the final scene. There's a reason for putting it there. And I think that especially somebody that's a consumer and a creator, you start seeing these little tropes, or these techniques put in place, and it makes you appreciate them more. Where you have the foreshadowing, and they allude to things, and I think that kind of gives me, and I can't speak for everybody that's from that consumer perspective, but it gives me appreciation, because it makes me feel smart, and I don't know anybody that doesn't want to feel smart, like as an audience member, if you see something and there's subtle foreshadowing of it, the gone in scene one, and it's used, like, or watching like a Sherlock Holmes thing, and you're able to solve the mystery before Sherlock does, in the conclusion. I mean, come on, who hasn't done that? Like, they're like, oh, I know it. Oh, it wasn't him. I'm glad nobody else was here. But I think that also works with being, when you invest research into your artistic vision, where you have elements that are faithful to specific like research subjects, where people who, it might not necessarily be for everyone, but somebody that knows what they're talking about can say you're making a story about fishing or something, and the majority of the audience will be like, whatever, okay, he's talking about different styles of knots, or different lures or whatever. But to a fishing expert who has that knowledge, will come in and see, oh wow, this person knows what they're talking about, and that level of appreciation is usually kind of I don't know, expanded out. It's almost like word of mouth, because now the fisherman knowledge audience member will be like, yeah, this show knows what it's talking about, or this story or this comic or whatever. They're actually showing what's actually used. And I think the same thing happens with like medieval historians. I mean, you don't need to be like the Metatron or something to be like, yes, I stamped that with my approval. But at the same time, if you're familiar with like, the Crusades, or even like Spanish architecture or something, and you're seeing that in the world, and you're like, okay, this takes place in Spain, or I know that type of armor because, like I worked on some of the Assassin's Creed game stuff, and that we were, there was a stickler for it has to be historically accurate. You can't have anachronisms. The moment you do that, somebody will call you on it. And it was, okay. So it was a minefield at times, but it encouraged us to do a lot of research. And I think
they would wipe the floor with you. In fact, I think if you went with some creative license, that yeah. It's kind of neat though, because now with you kind of do a little bit of everything. You do the writing, you do some art, you kind of put this together. Would you say that you have more of a writer's brain or an artist brain? Because I think that they are two very different types.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say it's a storyteller's brain. Whether or not that's through like an artistic representation, or through prose, or through something literary, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm hoping, the UX designer in me is kind of begging for the external feedback to tell me which brain I'm using.
So when you're putting together the story, all right, and we'll get into like your writing process and things like that. I'd love to hear about that. When you're sitting around, whether it's driving or whatever, and an idea pops into your head, it's like, oh, that'd be a great idea for a story. Do you think of it more visually, or do you think of it in dialogue? What kind of comes to you first?
Sometimes I hear lines,
Yes.
Like, and other times I will see, like, because I've been told I'm a visual thinker, and that makes it difficult verbally to communicate at times, because you're describing a rainbow to a blind person,
Right.
So I think it's, I don't know. So there's some, maybe one wire is tighter on the the storyteller side or the literary side, and the other wire is a little loose on the artistic side some days, and then I smack my head and it changes. I mean, because yeah, I agree. There's two. I mean, one is a very abstract. You're basically you're implying something with your art. It's here's an image. This is my interpretation of it. What's yours? And then with a writer, it's this is my thought. This is my my entire, like, this is the cogent story that I'm giving you. There's no real room for ambiguities there because it's all written right out there, unless I'm a poet. You know.
It's kind of funny because you said sometimes it's a line. I've been woken up because a line repeated itself, whether it was dialogue, it might have been just a title, just from a simple title or a word. It's like, oh, what can I do around that? For some reason, it's stuck in my head. I'm like, okay, get out before I go insane. Uh, you, you know, right? Exactly. Like you were saying, whacking your head against the wall and going, no, stop. I need sleep, please. But then there are times when I will have just a picture of a scene, and I go, man, I wish I could draw, because if I could just take that image and throw it on paper, it'd be great. And of course you lose the translation between the brain, down to your arms and your hands, and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't in my head, and so then you're relying on a team to put your dream together.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you first started, though, you were kind of working solo.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so what's that like, kind of working from a solo perspective, and then all of a sudden going, I don't have the time, and I don't have the knowledge or enough skill to really get what I want going out there. Going from solo to team collaboration, what is that like, and what's been the biggest challenge for you?
Fear has been the biggest challenge. It sounds really like a cop out, but I worry. Like, honestly, I a lot of creative people I found can be kind of socially problematic. If that makes any sense.
Yes.
They're geniuses.
We're all awkward.
Hey, you're talking to two girls on the scale here, okay? We're both Aspies.
well, it's just like there was a movie that came out a little while ago called Zero Charisma. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So it's about I'd say a late bloomer or a loser who was a dungeon master, and he created his own game and he had his friends, and unfortunately he never developed past adolescence, and he bullied his friends, and he was extremely overbearing with his little group and with his story and with his game and all this stuff, still living with mommy in his 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom house or whatever. And the story kind of kicks off where a new player joins the group, and it's somebody that's outside of their little chronicosm, and he's a hipster and he's a geek and he's really successful at what he does. So thus the horns get locked, and at the end of the film, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say there's no character growth, and that scared the hell out of me. Is that
because you're like, I don't want to be that guy?
Yeah, exactly. Like, is that me? Have I bullied? Like, have I, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, no narcissist knows they're a narcissist. It's, it's everybody else's problem. It's not the world's, it's a giant solipsism.
I love that because I can relate to that completely. When I was younger, it was just like, if the world didn't revolve around me, I was very closed off, especially if I didn't trust. So that whole fear factor was something that I had to get over, and eventually it became kind of a saying for me. It's like, hey, it didn't kill me. Okay, I must be doing it all right.
Yep. Yeah. But that fear is what what I found to be the biggest barrier, because again, when you're a visual thinker and you have a horrible economy of words. I mean, I'm probably blathering on now, but just you'll say 10 words when one could suffice, and when you say that and then you start using big words, you get this guy's a snob, or
yes, I call that Meredith monologuing.
Oh, no. But you know what? It's fine if you can use the big words as long as you use them correctly. Okay. Otherwise, because if you use the big words and you don't know what they mean and it's totally out of context, I'm sorry, you're a dumbass. I don't consider you a dumbass, Chris Fisk. I really don't. I think you're pretty smart.
Well, that's a perfectly cromulent response. That has embiggened me.
That's how we throw compliments around here. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And he will never be on our show again. He's like, no, these two, they're crazy. No.
I think that kind of goes with creativity, to be honest. I mean, we live in a crazy world. It's the only way we can survive.
Yeah, get the crazy out. I don't have time for jail, folks. I don't have time for jail. It's all on paper. So tell us a bit about your writing process then. When it comes to putting down ideas onto paper, do you outline first? Do you write in prose, or do you kind of go straight to script?
Well, when I initially wrote the Infinitale Chronicles, they weren't necessarily me writing them. I developed a system to help other people write kind of for me, unwittingly. When I was developing my role playing game system, the reason why I developed it was because, in addition to the fact that the books were extremely expensive, was that Dungeons and Dragons is a very, in game design terms, we call it railroading design, where if anybody else buys the module that the dungeon master is using, they can tell you the conclusion of the story. They know all the different pieces, and unless the dungeon master goes way out of left field and just completely ignores the module altogether, then it's a very linear path. There is you go here, you do this, you go there. And when I was starting up the Infinitale role-playing game system, I kind of looked to players to tell the story. I was, instead of a dungeon master in Infinitale, it's the narrator. So I would set the scene, and the characters had mechanics to actually incentivize them to act out their personas or their personality traits. Like, you would have like the scoundrel like Han Solo, or you'd have the naive farm boy like Luke Skywalker, and that would be how they would act. And there was a matrix that was developed that explained how each of the personalities kind of fed off of one another. So when players weren't there and their characters were needed for scenarios, you could look to their personalities and then see what the personalities of the non-playing characters were and see how they'd mesh. And it was like, oh, okay, well, this is what would happen. And in addition to that, the whole story structure itself, the 5-part act or whatever, with the build up, the inciting action there, the climbing action, the climax, the descending action, and then the conclusion. Well, I started mapping out kind of like little module components for those different plot points, and they were varied. So instead of it just being one after the other, after the other, after the other, it was almost like I had a collection of, at the time they were flashcards. They were just little notebook cards, and I would write down, okay, this is a setting card or a scene card, and it would take place here at the following location or whatever. Here's where the conflict, and these would be the cast members or the supporting cast or whatever that would be there, and it would just be a card for reference. And I would continue doing that with multiple plot points, so that you wouldn't have just one. So when a player is playing the game and they think, oh, I know where this is going, well, you could just, whoosh, I'm changing directions on them. And suddenly, no two stories or no two games were the same. And as this was all being played out, the game was kind of a cooperative storytelling, exercise, where things like improv acting was greatly encouraged. In fact, it was mechanically rewarded. You get the Emmy for the evening when your character hams it up. And as this was all playing out, we took turns chronicling these stories, and they were all written down, and they sat in a storage container for about 30 years. And after I went off to uni, went off to Australia, went off to Japan, Southern California, I finally come back. And I was like, I'm out of the gaming industry now. I'm creatively constipated. What could I do for some relief? And I opened this up and I looked at these stories and I went, wow, this is this is a decent story. This is actually kind of cool. And I started thinking of what I could do with it. Could I make the game? Could I make an animation? Because I was a huge fan of 80s Saturday morning cartoons, anime. The anime of the 90s, I think, was the absolute apex. But I ended up writing screenplays with them. So when we were salvaging them for the comic book, it was all in screenplay format with pencil doodles and scene notes and little layout suggestions or whatever. But more or less, it was originally intended as like a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is, you had the advantage of being able to do that, though, because you saw scripts and things like that. You saw things like thumbnails or the page layouts, storyboarding and things like that. And so having that kind of experience really translate very well into comic books, as opposed to somebody who's coming in again not knowing a thing and going, okay, where I have a story, where do I start? Because that's really hard. Again, we kind of said this at the beginning. If we had started this when we were much younger, don't know if we would have had the discipline or the patience to
or
to
the
get
finances.
Or the finances.
Right,
Yeah.
I was so coming with that one.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it is, if you can do it all, great. We hate you. But if you've got a, if
That's
you're
right,
like
Billy.
if you're the writer and you're like, I'm relying on somebody else to do the art, that's an investment in time to find the artist. But your money is being sent somewhere else, and you're hoping that they can kind of translate your words into these images.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you have Antonio Brandao as your artist for this.
Yes.
I love him. He's got he did the 8 pages of my book, and I need more, but I need to make some money. I need more pages, Antonio. I'll get back to you. I just have to rob a bank.
Yeah. Don't ask where this came from.
Right. But yeah, I mean, so what was it like what was your journey to find artists for this, whether it was gaming or for Infinitale?
So I was very fortunate, and I mean, of all the blessings that I have in life, you got to take the good with the bad. I mean, it's as awful as the video game development industry was for it felt like a salmon swimming upstream for a decade.
Sure.
Moving all over the place. Your employment is measured in years or
and it's
months.
very competitive. Very competitive.
Too right. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to work with some amazingly talented artists. I mean, I feel spoiled, honestly. Like, you look at art and like you suddenly become an art snob, because you're like, oh man, well, I totally worked with this one guy that like hell, half the Blizzard team, like I've seen them doing their concept stuff, standing over their shoulder while they've got their Cintiqs doing it. I'm like, yeah, that is so good, and then it's like, I can't do that, but that kind of gave me the avenues to be like, hey, I think you could help me with this, or and for example, the artist that I kind of tapped on the shoulder for our concept of the game, we were trying to define the aesthetic of the game world, is this Australian artist named Zach. He goes by Zedge. And we had a lot of back and forth with, how are these characters supposed to look, the races, how are they like, what do the silhouettes look like, things that like really don't even have that much bearing in tabletop role-playing games, but it was, coming from video games or whatever, or animated media, silhouettes are a very important part of visual language that help define characters that you don't really see in like you look in a Dungeons and Dragons manual or whatever, and every character looks pretty much the same build, more or less, with like, a Star Trek head, like the aliens in Star Trek, they're all human with a little bit of stuff on their head. I spent years with him, and then finally I reached out to a company called High Concept Media Properties. I believe they're in California. This guy Zen, who runs it, says, "Yeah, I can totally help you, kind of, because you're new to this. I can help you get what you need as far as interior artists, colorists, all the, printing, handling all of that. Because again, I come from games and animated media instead of the print stuff, which is odd because I worked for a newspaper. But I never really had the insights into what goes into that comic book creation from the exterior perspective, not just the interior art and storytelling. So Zen helped me out, and that was where we were introduced to Antonio and another Portuguese artist named Alzir Alves, who's our colorist, and they've been wonderful. I mean, I'm sure Antonio's got a few words for me here and there when it's like, no, it needs to look like this, no, this, or he's like, God, this is the third time, but ultimately.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, sorry.
I was going to say, like my own experience with Antonio was I sent him prose and he's like, oh, I love horror. And I was like, great. And he's like, okay, script it out and send it to me. And I was just like, okay, great. And send it. And I was so excited because it's my first work that I was so in love with the art that it took an editor to go, yeah, that's great. But did you read the script with it? And I was like, I don't care. I'm the writer. I'll fix it.
Oh.
But that was it. That was, about, because I put that trust in him, seeing some of the other, like seeing his ratings and things like that. Doing the research was the hardest thing for me, finding an artist. You had the leg up in being introduced to people, instead of spending like countless hours on DeviantArt and things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of jealous. A little jealous. That's all right. It's all right.
Wow. Someone's jealous of me.
It's your story, awesome. Meredith. It's your story. Your struggle. You struggle. You've got a Lifetime movie coming with your comics.
Oh my goodness. So does Chris, apparently. Right? Don't we all? Oh my gosh. But you know what? We just blasted past our 30-minute mark. We're going to take a little bit of a bump here and we'll be right back. Let me get this up here. We are Raging with Chris Fisk. Infinitale, Chronicles, The War of the Trees, Book 1 is available on Indiegogo right now. Head over there. This is episode 53, and we'll be right back after this. And Nita, you want to take this one?
All right, guys. For a 10% discount on your Gemini mailers, you head over to Gemini Comic Supply Store and enter coupon code VOLT10. That is coupon code VOLT number 10. Thank you to Varian Grant and Indie Volt Radio for this advertisement.
That's right. And speaking of Indie Volt, we are simulcasting to Indie Volt, Geek Insider, Comics in More New Jersey, as well as RAGIN AVC. Hit the button wherever it is that you are listening from, watching from. That's right. Hit the button, hit the subscribe, share it out with your friends. And of course, check out the show notes because we have the links to Chris Fisk's Infinitale Chronicles, The War of the Trees, Book 1 on Indiegogo, plus his social media. Follow him everywhere. Like I said, don't peek at his windows because that's weird.
I mean, unless he's into that. That's...
Well, unless he could be into that. I don't know, Chris, you into that?
Yeah, stay out of his windows.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to touch on with you was something that is true to my heart. It's community. You know, where you said that it's kind of community that brought some of these stories to life as far as your games and things, how it translates into your stories. What communities do you kind of hang out in and things like that where people can find that kind of community? Because there are a lot of places out there that'll just tear you down.
Oh yeah,
we like uplifting people.
Yeah, in fact, that's kind of what kind of lured me over to the indie comic stuff. Was I felt like every one of my hobbies has been co-opted. Almost feels like everybody in it is now telling me, "You've had your time, get out. This isn't for you anymore." You know, and I'm like, "What did I do?" You know,
right.
Step aside, like. You're just a neck-bearded incel. I'm a what? I don't even know what that means. You know, I'm in my 40s. I'm not like a basement dweller. I don't live with my parents. Have long since gone. Like what are you talking about? And it just all these like, you know, like when I was in the video game industry, it was like a Hitchcock camera moment when I saw the utter content that these creators had for their audience. Like. These are the people that are paying your bills. Why do you hate them so much?
Right.
And, you know, they just bitch and complain. Blah, blah. It's like, well, why don't you listen to them? Like, you know, I mean, that's why I'm a UX designer. You know, like part of my job, like the majority of my job is to listen to people tear apart our product so that I can understand why, you know, what their user pains are so that we can make them better. You know, you don't like, you want to get basically whatever their objective is and wherever they are, you want to get as much crap out of the way between them and it. And, you know, you need that level of I don't want to say empathy, but you need to at least understand where somebody's coming from. And all of these hobbies that I'm in, like I get told in Dungeons and Dragons, you know, orcs are now racist or something. And I'm like, wait, what? What?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Or all the superhero movies now, it's like, your time's up, you know, it's time to step aside. It's like,
oh my god.
I mean, I knew they were going after the Dark Elves because they had pulled an episode of the Community, the Dungeons and Dragons episode, because they tried to say that Kim Jong was using blackface when he did the Dritz Sword. It's like, what?
but that's the like that really like the communities of these hobbies that I've had like got kind of rancid. Like they just it was just constant like you know like you had to watch what you said, like you watch what you laughed at, like utterly ridiculous things people would say and do, and you're like, we're not supposed to laugh at that.
I better save that for when I get home.
Yeah, it's like it was just a minefield. It was just scary, and you know it depressed me for a while because it's like, you know, I'm watching television series or whatever, or things that I once loved, like Star Wars or whatever, and I'm like, this is garbage. Like,
yeah, it kind of makes you forced into going back into your basement, you know, by yourself.
Yeah, well,
you know?
it's where I started seeing the indie comics, where it was like, okay, so they're pushing this in Batman. Like, I don't even want to get into that. I'm not Starfire stuff, but
you mean that crap they put out? Like what? Oh my god. Okay, yeah, we won't.
It's so bad, and yet I'm being told by these people that you have no right to say that that's bad. You have to buy this. You have to celebrate it, or you're some kind of istophobe or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just tired. I want to escape. Like, my life isn't some bed of roses. Like, I want escapism to get away from it sometimes.
That comic cost me about 40 Twitter followers in 2 days. I went off.
It looked like color forms.
I referenced those, but I couldn't remember what they were called because it was like the little peel and stick things, guys.
Yep.
Come on. Yep. Oh my God.
It was just like the protagonist that you're supposed to identify with is just this miserable, like self-insert. It's like, wow, if that's a reflection of the creator, I don't even want to be in the same zip code as that. Like, you know, and it just, you know, you're getting like just pushed out. So when I started seeing these indie comics popping up, like the first one for me, and this is weird, but when I first started setting up the social media stuff for the Infinitale Chronicles stuff, Twitter actually did something nice, which was surprising. Usually it's just like a big cesspool of just outrage and anger or whatever. It was Twitter had an algorithm that said, oh, hey, you know, some of your tags or whatever, here's some similar things that you might like. And one of them was, I'm not sure if you know who Rini Draws is.
Yep.
But
yeah,
she has her book. Yeah, Fiendish. And I was like, what the hell is that?
Oh, yes.
Oh my God. Like, back. and that was the gateway drug. I mean, from there you could hear like the psychedelic, and it was just like all of these indie or CG streams or whatever started turning into the home shopping network for me. And they're like, back this book. I'm like, already did.
Good.
Yeah. And it's like some awesome stuff, and it's not like amateurish, you know, like when you think of like the mainstream, it's like, okay, that's the golden seal. And then whatever the indie stuff is, it's like you're compromising it because it's the edgy whatever. And I'm looking at this going, did you see I'm Not Starfire versus what is it, Inglorious Rex? You know,
Right.
like come on, or Cyberfrog, like look at that stuff.
Seriously. And that's the thing. It's like a lot of people now, because I've been in indie publishing, you know, for a while, just because I'm a freelancer and I love to write. That's always had a bad rap. It's like, oh, well, you weren't good enough to be picked up by the big publishing houses. And it's kind of the same thing with indie comics.
But you know what?
Now.
They're making more money than the motherfuckers right now. What?
You have people who are going out there now and they're like, well, you know what? I'm not bound by what you want me to create. I can create my own stuff, you know, and now don't get me wrong. There's miles and miles of crap out there too.
Yeah, there always
you know, and I think a lot of people, they don't take the industry seriously. They don't take it they're not looking at it as a business, as a viable business. They're looking at it as maybe like as a hobby. You know, but then when you jump into the deep end and you're like, this is what I want to do, kind of like what you're doing, you know, you're kind of, it looks like you're merging all of these things with the role-playing games, video, comic books and stuff. I mean, really making kind of a cohesive world for these characters, and all of this world building is very exciting. Not something you could do, I don't think, without having your wrists tied, because you're indie, you know. And how dare you have a voice to do all of these things, and how dare it be good? Because I think mainstream is probably getting a little scared.
Well, yeah, I think they perpetuate that myth that the mainstream is the superior quality to indie because they're scared. I mean, it's when you see things like what EVS pulls, you know.
Oh my God, or Malin, like they're just they're blowing people out of the water with the prices, the money they're acquiring on these campaigns. It's like, and what you big boy over there, Marvel and DC, can barely freaking pay your rent, please.
Well, they're also telling us they're telling their customers go away, and customers are listening and saying, you know what, I will.
Okay.
And fortunately, we've got alternatives that are superior. Like, you know, I mean, my wallet is whimpering in the corner over there after all the backing.
Oh, I know. That's one of the scary things about Kickstarter is like there are so many good campaigns there as well as Indiegogo. At least Indiegogo, it's like take my money now. I don't have to worry about it. Kickstarter, I've gotten into trouble a couple of times. It's like,
Surprise!
oh crap. Yeah, they all came out at the same time. And by the way, my electric bills do. Oops, I hate when that happens.
Or then they pull the double whammy when the Kickstarters catch up to you, and then all of a sudden there's this Indiegogo that you gotta have. Like, I won't leave that. Rainbow the Brute did it for me. It was like I was broke, and oh my god, I was like, that's
it. The children are eating ramen noodles this week.
That's right. That's we're eating ramen and Tostino's pizzas.
Yeah.
So here we go. We've got your Indiegogo up here right now. We are going to play the video towards the end, but so tell us a bit about your campaign, because I saw that big number. I was like, Chris, what are you doing?
I know.
But then I saw something in here that said, just whether or not you make it to goal, these books are going out. They are going to be delivered.
Oh yeah. At the very top, I put the notice to backers.
Mm-hmm.
The book's already done. In fact, Nita's got a copy of it, or the digital copy of it, and that's an advanced copy. So there's a few edits that'll be in the physical version. But the book's already done. It's sitting at the printers waiting for quantities, and I have like all this. Like seriously, my dining room table is like full of swag. So. It's all here. It's not like I'm asking for like hey, I have an idea, fund me. I have all this stuff. I'm trying to gauge interest, and
right.
The blunder for that obviously it was my ignorance and not knowing how to run this play the system here was I wanted to be 100% transparent, showing users this is what it cost me, or viewers this is what it's cost me, and how much can I mitigate that damage. Financially, by the backing, just to give that idea of okay, this is how much it's costing me for me personally, not just for the audience, but this is how much it's costing me. How well can I get close to that on the first book and possibly the second book? Because I'm not planning on winning or succeeding in this campaign, so to speak, but I am hoping that it generates enough of a percentage for enough of an incentive to go to the next book, because I have no delusions that I'm going to be making any money on the first book. It'd be nice, but it's not one of those things where I set out instantly say, my first book, I have an unproven product, I'm a nobody. Suddenly I'm going to be, a runaway success, on the first book.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people. I think a lot of people get discouraged by that. In fact, I talked to.
I've seen a bunch of people walk.
Yeah,
their first attempt fail and they're done. It's over. There's no money to be made there, not for me anyway, and leave. And it's like, no.
Yeah. Well, I have a day job, so I'm not looking to make money on this just yet. I mean, in a way, this is kind of like a vanity thing, but it's this. I would like to leave a legacy. Something.
For sure, I get that.
30 years of stories. I mean,
and I'm going to push back. I don't think it's a vanity thing, because what you're doing is, in my opinion, smart. You're judging the interest out there. And from there, because especially if people aren't familiar with your storytelling and things, this gives them an opportunity to discover you and go, oh, where's book 2? Because from what Nita and I have experienced, book 1, great for collectors, and a lot of them might fall off for book 2. But if you continue on, if you're like, hey, I'm dedicated to this, I'm dedicated to the craft and this line of storytelling, and you come back for 3, that's when you're going to find your audience.
Is where you find that's the sweet spot numbers. When when it's moving again between 3 and 4, you not only have that first that rush in to get your first edition, and it kind of backs off from the collectors. Then that's when you start to see your true fan base begin.
Right.
And people want to give up before they even get to that point.
But it speaks to the dedication too, and the investment, because if you can make it to book 3 because you're taking yourself seriously as a storyteller and a comic book creator, even a game maker, a game designer and all that stuff, it's like finding the sweet spot where your fan base is, and then expanding on that. Because if they are following you through, to book 3, now they become your advocates.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, nobody
And
owes
and this
me.
artwork is beautiful.
It is.
Sweet.
It is.
Thanks. Yeah, that's one of the trading cards. This one right here. So
Now,
Nice.
with the trading cards, is that something that you're going to have available on a store later on, or is it kind of like an Indiegogo exclusive?
well, I'm obviously I want to entice early adopters with as
Mhm.
many carrots as possible. So there have been discussions of a possible art book later on, but as far as physical cards go, the only way that you're going to really get them is through this campaign.
Okay.
And to sweeten the deal, in addition to the 8 character cards with the covers as well, there's also a 9th card that's the player skill card, and this is from the game. And it's like, okay, it's a player skill. You know, I'm not playing a game. I'm reading a book. What the hell is this? Well, you flip it over, and it's the player skill language of Slithrith, which is an ancient language that was forgotten in this world. It's kind of like the way that we treat Latin, and it has a cipher on it, or a little key, and you can translate elements of the story, i.e., monuments or ruins or something might have something written on them, and you can use this to translate that. Or there might be creatures or characters that speak this language, and if you don't have the card, then it's kind of like the C-3PO and R2-D2 conversations, where R2-D2, you found a cigarette, but if you do have it, then you can fully understand what they're saying, and it gives a kind of a richer experience. But it's a bonus. It's not needed to comprehend the story.
Right. And I love how you've come up with kind of gamifying it too, because that makes it fun for people, you know? And again, we're kind of scrolling through the campaign to look at the art and stuff. This is really stunning. Art by Antonio Brandao, colors by
Alzir Alves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
I was watching one of your interviews, and you're talking about the cover trap.
Yes.
And I was hoping that by doing the 50 colors full pages, that we wouldn't inflict that upon our readers, because I totally get, like, that's a bait and switch for me,
Mhm.
and I definitely don't want to do that to people, especially my first book.
Well, we've all been caught in that trap, I think. We find a cover that we really like, and maybe we were in a rush and didn't look through the interiors and stuff, and we're like, oh, and like be like seriously disappointed. It's like, now I have a pretty picture. I could have just bought a print for cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tear that off, frame it, and throw the
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like a couple months ago there was a toilet paper shortage after all.
Right? It's got to stay over here somewhere.
Been a lot of sewage treatment problems with it. This is I'm not Starfire.
So, for everybody who's tuning in, we are looking at the Infinitale Chronicles, The War of the Trees, number 1. Number 1 suggests that there's 2, possibly 3. When you're looking at this entire world that you're building, does it ever feel too big for you?
Well, it's 30 years worth of storytelling, so it's huge, but I don't know if it would be too big or too small. Or it's one of those things where I think it's up for the readers to kind of get what they want out of it, and if they don't, like when you're making a movie or a television series, or even, I guess, with a comic book, it's better to have more material than you need. And when you present to the users only a small amount of that, and they're wanting more, you can always provide supplementary material. But if you don't have enough, then things start getting problematic, where you get the train in motion and you're laying down the tracks and you just run out of railroad ties.
Yeah, and that it's like chasing the cart down a hill, a very steep hill, and you're like, oh my gosh, deadlines and everything, and then all of a sudden your brain doesn't work anymore. I don't know what that's about. No, not at all.
Well, I had a friend once tell me that the sign of a good storyteller, who's also a world builder, is somebody who could survive in that Monty Python and the Holy Grail, could survive the answers or the questions from the bridge keeper. You know, when they ask questions about your world, if you're like, well, I don't know,
Oh yeah.
So it's,
So I mean, 30 years of storytelling. So when you found or rediscovered or just decided to go back to it and things, script right, how much of it did you look at and go, oh my God, that needs a lot of work? Or were you like, hey, that's pretty damn good. You know, let's script that out and make it happen.
I was honestly surprised with how much of it was actually viable for, you know, it didn't need that adult massaging, because we had librarians playing this game as well.
Nice.
Adults. So it wasn't just a bunch of dumb kids, you know, dyslexic me.
Passing a notebook and yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it like, for example, I used to carry around my 3-ring binder of game stuff. This used to be Chris's game. And you know, I fancied myself as an artist back then. I've gotten old and gotten sick, and my hands got all messed up. But you know, actually, I could turn off the ring light for a moment and show you that, you know, there is some level of artistic integrity in my ability to at least create, you know, from an illustrative perspective. You know, that picture is from 1994. So.
Well, so having some level of skill yourself as far as being able to put the art together, what was it like talking to another artist? I mean, did you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm giving up my baby here to another person, I'm entrusting them? Was there that level of fear?
I don't think it was necessarily fear, because I respected the art. Like, I looked at the material that the artists had already created, and it was like, okay, this is in line with what I would like to do. You know, it wasn't like a blind art search where I was like, I don't know what your work is, and I know, you know, I've been told you're good. I haven't seen really any of your examples or whatever, but here's my world, make it. You know,
yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth because, like I said, I met with Zed Edge there when we were initially defining some of the aesthetic choices for the characters. There's been a lot of like research actually put into the designs of the characters. Like you'll see, for example, every instance of those elves, you'll notice they're barefooted, and that makes no sense in a military scenario. But there's a reason for that. When I was doing research on the Aishi or the Irish elves or the Seelie and the Unseelie, they had the Scandinavian elves, so the Horsavar or the Dokofar. They all had similarities, and one of them was that they were elemental creatures that were more spiritual, and they needed to be in touch with nature at all time, or soil, like a tree or a plant. They hate deserts. They hate standing on flat stones. You know, just like any kind of flowering plant would be. And I was like, okay, that's a detail in the design. And then same thing with, you'll notice that none of them have anything that's metal or I'm sorry, none of the metal is like silver or iron or anything. No ferrous alloys. Everything is brass and bronze and goldish. And the reason for that is because in the Fey folklore, iron is they have an aversion to it. It's like touching it, it's like biting into a fork, or like nails on a slate or something, or a chalkboard or something. And so in silver is downright poisonous to them. You know, there's that scene in that new Dracula movie that came out that was, I thought that was really cool. It's like, your ring, it offends me. And it was like, oh, it's a silver ring. That's cool, you know. And that's actually, you know, part of the mythos. And I was like, that's really cool. They included that.
Have you ever gotten lost in the research?
Probably. I mean, like it's always bouncing around in there somewhere. And it's, you know, I've got reams of notes, folders of elves.
Yeah. That's hard. That's hard to do, because you get, especially if it's something that you love, you know, obviously you love the tales of the Fae, and folklore and things like that. And so diving into that, because there's such a rich history of what's out there that you can get lost. And I'm sure, I mean, certainly it influences your artwork and your storytelling. But we are at our hour, Chris, and it went by really, really fast.
Dude, that was fast. I know. It's like,
I know we
I
would
would
love to get
look.
back and talk a lot more. But so, final question for you is for anybody who is new coming into the industry, whether it is in gaming or comics, what is the best piece of advice you could give them?
Reach out to those who are doing what you want to do. You'd be surprised how helpful people are. I mean, especially here in the indie comics, I was blown away by the amount of support I was, in advice I was given. That was extremely, extremely nice of people who had no reason to be nice to me. So that I'm very appreciative of that. And I think that has helped a lot. I've had people look at the campaign, obviously the what is it? The flexible goal and the 12,000, they're like, nobody's going to back that, and, basically it's okay. Well, lesson learned, at least I know why it's not doing as well as it could have. And also I had some help with perk compositions, things that were added, things that were changed, and then just getting your story and books out there to people who might not necessarily be your friends, because I find that feedback from strangers is really, really more useful than your friend who's not trying to hurt your feelings.
Oh, I don't mind hurting people's feelings. You got to get you the right friends.
Yeah.
She's brutal. She'll sit there and she'll be like, cut it. You don't need it.
well, when I was in game development, I actually, as a designer, we had focus groups, and I'd stand there with a clipboard and I'd be walking behind people. They'd be playing the game and they would just get livid. And you'd have people like dropping F-bombs, like, who freaking designed this needs to get publicly beaten,
Okay.
Yeah. Or,
it wasn't me, I promise.
or even when I was developing Infinitale, the Pelham Public Library, they weren't my friends initially. These were community kids from all over the town. And they came in and, wow, this is the dumbest rule I've ever seen. My friend says that this mechanic is so stupid that it must have been created by somebody with an extra chromosome. Like,
oh my gosh.
Wow.
Dude.
Wow. Dude.
It's like, okay, well, how do you work with that kind of feedback? Oh my gosh.
Well, because it's the honesty of children, like they're not saying it. They're just, my friend says, and it's like, that's nice. Can you tell me the name and location of the school your friend goes to? Yeah, their house is going to burn down.
Wait, plausible deniability. Okay, put it on paper because we don't have time for jail.
Yeah.
So we're looking at your campaign. You have got, let me see, that's a small screen there. 30 days left. Is that your first 30 days? Do you plan on extending to 60?
This is the second 30 days.
This is the second 30 days. Okay. So you've got 30 days left. It's a flexible goal. I love the fact that at the very top, you are saying that these books, whoever backs it, they are going to get the product because it's done. And that is something I think when people see a big goal like that, they're like, oh, I'm never going to see this book, because too many people go out there and they rely on the Kickstarter to even start the book, even start the process. The fact that you have a completed project.
Y'all give me $5,000 for my idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody's got an idea.
Sure. I've got ideas if you want to throw money at me. But hey, we're talking about Chris's project here. But I love the fact that it is a completed project, ready to go. Basically printing costs, yes?
Yep.
Printing and shipping. Yeah. So, whoever backs, you're going to get your books. You're not going to have to wait forever either. And like he said earlier during the interview, is the files are at the printers. So, take a look at it, back it. If you can't, share it out with your friends. I swear it is so important for us to help network and help each other, especially as indie creators, because when you see good projects, like you were saying, Rennie Draws, when you saw that, it opened up your eyes to other creators and going, oh my gosh, there is quality out there. Look to your friends, look to your peers, and see what else is out there. Hit the button. That's what I say. And I would love to finish up with your video, if that's all right with you, Chris.
Sure.
All right. Let's play that. Let me see where I am. Put that on the big screen, and here we go.
We were all innocent once. That time is no more. The illusions of safety and assurance are inexorably dispelled by experience. On the world of Asperia, the children of the gods were torn from their sanctuary of a blissful ignorance and unchallenged dogma. Eventually, everyone must grow up, even the eternally young. A single act of defiance set events in motion that would shatter the very foundation of existence. As the conflagration of a great war burned through the lands, unlikely allies rose from the ashes to defy extinction. The angered gods sought to rid the world of a blight that had befell their flocks. This infection was an unforgivable sin, the true knowledge of creation. Their wrath was cruel and merciless. These are the tales of the great war that destroyed our world, and of the heroes that led us to new lands beyond it. Infinitale Chronicles, the War of the Trees.
Take my money. Chris, it was a pleasure talking with you. Have we missed anything? Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of share with our viewers and our listeners?
Well, I think the campaign ends at the end of this month. So get in while you can. It's not going into on demand. So I'm just basically going to use what I make from this. And however much I make, the faster the second book will come. So that's what I'm hoping, anyways. So yeah, and there will possibly be a catch-up tier in the second book. So if you miss out on this one, no worries. We'll get to the second.
Perfect. And are you going to be at any events? Are you going to comic conventions or anything like that?
I will not be, but I believe Zen might be.
Okay, cool.
I'll have to talk to him about getting some promotional stuff if he's in for it.
All right. Well, we will be keeping an eye on you, and please let us know where else you're going to be sitting and talking about this campaign so we can share it out with our friends.
Yeah, tag us and we'll share it. So
definitely,
Awesome.
definitely give
Thank
us a
you.
tag, and we'd love to see that book. I need that book in my life. Just saying.
do it.
And on that note, you guys, it has been a pleasure to sit with you, Chris. This has been Ragin' with episode 53. Make sure that you share out all these links. And we will see you on the flip side. Hey, Nita.
Yo,
Final words.
throw my dudes.
We're out of here, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Hey there. This is Meredith Loughran with Ragin'. And I wanted to let you know that we encourage and promote independent creators and their projects through organic interaction, consultations, and more. Visit Nita and me at RAGINAVC.com for details and contact information. Hit the button.